All right, everybody. Happy Tuesday and welcome to another episode of Learning Tech Talks, where we are exploring the possibilities of learning tech while cutting through the fluff to answer the questions you need answered to make the right decisions when building your digital learning ecosystem. Today, I'm joined by Jordan Fladell, I think I pronounced that right, CEO over at mLevel, and we are talking about gamification and microlearning. So first of all, did I pronounce your last name right? I think no.
You did great. You did great, Chris. I will tell you that, my name's always mispronounced a bunch. I think my grandparents would have told you it's Fladell, but Fladell is also good enough. I've heard much worse.
Okay. So I was at least in the same ballpark, right?
You did great.
Okay, good. Well, hey, so, we've had a couple conversations so far. One thing that I'm always interested in when we first start talking about this is when people go off to the learning tech side. I think several guests have referred to it as the dark side. They've moved into the dark side of kind of the vendor space. I'm always curious the journey. Did you start there, or what made you decide to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go be, in charge of a learning technology company?
Yeah, so I've always been in technology, Chris. I've always been involved in technology, whether it's, I started my career personally in what I'll call the interactive agency space. It wasn't called that when I started with a web design shop, but evolved from doing simple web design and interactive programs to become a full service interactive agency. And then went into actually the tech side on the hosting side of the business, which exposed me to this thing at the early days back in, I won't say how far long ago, but long ago enough, where hosting was a new solution, hosting things on the web, right? And then I learned about this thing called application software that could run on top of this great internet technology, what we now call SaaS solutions in the technology space, right? And so from there, I kind of evolved into, spending more time in tech. Had a short consulting gig before I came into become a part of mLevel. And really, it was around the technology piece that kind of got me there. Another space where there was an opportunity to help people in large organizations essentially deliver solutions on technology without having to understand technology. I think that's one of the things that I love to talk about, which is, technology can be that scary place where the dark side, as you call it, or the black space where people get very afraid of it because technologists like to make things more complicated than they are. And so we spend a lot of time at mLevel trying to what we call in my career on democratizing the delivery of technology. How do we ensure that whatever's built, whatever's deployed, whatever the customer is going to use, they can maintain on their own without having a significant burden or fear of that technology, right? And that's what kind of drives my passion. It always has. I always look for spaces where there's opportunities to democratize the delivery of it, whether it's building websites, intranets, social enterprises, or now in the space of learning technology. That's always been my passion around technology. And so that's where I got my journey started to get into the learning space.
Okay, got it. So it really was the tech side, and then you got into more the learning side of technology versus you were in learning and then went to the learning tech. So our journeys are maybe a little bit similar, but different. Cool. And actually, I'm going to go on a little bit of a sidebar based on something you said with that, talking about, software as a service. I'm curious your perspective on this because I see it a fair amount where you get the debate of, do we build it or do we buy it, right? And some organizations are determined to say, well, I think we can build something similar versus going out and buying it. What's your perspective on, what's the advantage to going with a SaaS solution versus trying to custom build something?
Well, there's a lot of advantages in SaaS because it gives you flexibility. Right. So if you buy SaaS correctly and you have the right, and I'll preface this by saying having the right learning architecture, right? If you have the right learning architecture, environment, and stack, SaaS should give you the ability to pick what I'll call point solutions, for lack of a better term, and plug and play with them as you need them if you've built this the right way. If you think about marketing is the perfect example to look at for me when you talk about the tech stack. Marketing has figured out how to build a tech stack, some of it on the back of Salesforce and other companies, where they're able to pull point solutions in and enable and disenable them to reach their goals, and they do it rapidly. So when you look at what's the reason of buying and look at SaaS, you also have to take a step back and think about your culture. But I think one of the biggest values you can get is speed and flexibility, right? When you build something on your own, there's a lot of value in that as well, but there's a lot of risk in there. One of it is around what I'll call time to market. How long does it take you to get the solution built? Like if a company shows up and they've got 80% of what you want out of the box, and you say, I'm going to build my own because I need to fill the other 20%, right? I need 100%. Well, to be clear, you need the 100%, and you get it in time enough to solve the problem. What a lot of companies, the buy decision, right, or the build decision should be all about time to delivery. right? And then the second factor is really long-term ownership, right? Is this something that we're willing to support and own long-term, right? If you built your own, let's just look at the learning management system. Let's start with that.
Yeah, there's a good example.
Right? So how many learning management systems are there out there today? I don't know, hundreds?
Countless.
Countless, right?
Too many, yep.
Clutter galore in the market, right? But there are 300-pound gorillas or whatever they are in the market, but they have built basically a mousetrap to help you manage the delivery of learning to the learning associate. Could you build your own learning management system? Yes. Should you build your learning management system? No. Why? Why? Because somebody else has already invented like 90% of what you want, right? Now, Could you build your own whatever system, whether it's microlearning, gamification? The answer to these questions are no, unless it is a highly targeted, high-value opportunity that has the time, budget required to execute, and you have a long-term maintenance strategy, okay? And notice the key term here. If you build something yourself, right? So a lot of these listeners who are on this podcast work at large companies. Unfortunately, the way corporate America works today, or corporations work today, and I won't even say America, corporations across the globe, is a good majority of the staff that work in these IT departments and development shops are outsourced, right? So now it's not build versus buy. It's actually build versus buy versus outsource, right? Because basically, unless you have a gigantic IT shop, so, and again, maybe there's some listeners out here like, I got thousands of developers. We hire them all day long. They have nothing else to do, and they're here to build for me. Great. Go build whatever you want.
Right. Yeah, fine.
Go do it. But most
you're the 0.03%.
And congratulations, by the way, I think. I'm not even sure it's a win, but congratulations. But let's say you're like a normal company, right? And so you get that you're awesome. You design it, you have a user experience team come in, they build what you want to do, you get it framed up, you go to fund it, you get funding for the project, and now the IT team says, I'm going to outsource the development to insert vendor here, right? Whatever the vendor is, Accenture, Deloitte, Slalom, whoever the vendor is, right? Someone's building it. I don't know who's building it, but somebody's building this solution. When they're done, even if they do the best documentation, they're turning it back over to who? The company. Now, the company's giving it back to the IT department who's outsourced the building of it. So the IT developer didn't write the original source code, didn't understand the architecture, wasn't a part of the build. Okay, so let's say you get the application back. Now it breaks. Who fixes it? What's the SLA time?
So you're going back.
Right. So now all of a sudden you've built this great product, but you're continuing to sink costs in it. So you have to think about, am I willing to spend money on this forever? Is the value here? And I always tell people, I think when you build something, it should be for highly targeted, highly specialized events, and literally look at it as throwaway tech, right? Because I'm building it for the solution. It's going
to be obsolete. We're not going to. It's a major
rollout of a new product release, and I want my brand spot on. I want everything. I want it to be the best thing ever. I'm throwing it on Wall Street. I'm going to do all these things with it. Right? Great, go build it. But in learning technology in particular, I would build nothing ever on my own. The cost and where you sit in the stack of the corporate food chain makes it to me never makes sense to build. Always makes sense to buy, lease, and I call it lease, by the way, because that's really what you're doing. When you think about a SaaS, you're leasing the technology.
You're leasing it. Yep.
And when you're done with the lease, just like if you were done with your car, like, if you're sitting here and I lease a car for 3 years, I don't have to buy that car. I can buy that car, right? I can actually extend the lease out, right? But when I'm done, let's say I don't have to. Right. The best example think about it is, let's say you're a growing family, right? And now you've gone from 2 kids to 3 kids, right? And no longer does your 2-seater car go. Maybe it's 3 kids to 4 kids, whatever it is. And now you're looking up. But one of your kids in that group is a teenager who's close to getting to college years. Like you've spread out your journey on having kids, right?
Yep.
Okay. So do you buy yourself a big, gigantic SUV, like a Suburban or something like that, and own that forever? Or, you know what, in 3 years, I'm going to go ahead and know that I'm losing a kid, not losing a kid, but my kids in college.
I am going to wait.
I don't want to have the burden of owning a Suburban forever because I really like my small Acura MDX, right? And so it doesn't meet my needs. Again, it's just an example of how to think about it without thinking about the tech, because I think tech is scary. But if you think real world scenarios, you're leasing technology to serve a need. That to me always seems like more sense than, and even as a vendor, than building custom. But I also understand there's a place for custom as well.
Yeah. Well, and that's right. In my experience, I completely agree with you that I have yet to encounter some piece of learning tech where I really feel, especially with what's in the market now, where you go, we should really custom build this from the ground up because we can do it faster, less expensive, and maintain it better than somebody else could for a subscription service. I haven't seen it. So I guess if anybody's listening is like, oh, I have the perfect use case, I'd love to hear it. Because for me, it's just not something I've seen. And yeah, I think the other thing too, though, if you think about it, and I think this is a little bit of a mindset shift for learning and development. It's kind of this idea that, oh, when we buy this learning technology, that's what we're going to use and have forever. And it's like, well, maybe not. Things could change. You might need to adapt. Your business might shift. You can't just assume that, this is the holy grail of this piece of learning technology. So that was a little bit of a sidebar from just gamification and microlearning. But despite the fact I talked to a lot of providers who follow the SaaS or PaaS model, that's a question that we haven't really tackled. So since you're on the tech side more, that's your background, I was interested your take on it.
Yeah, and I would also just second add to that. I think you hit it nail on the head, which is also consider as a learning person, this is the first time where technology is evolving at a very rapid pace, right? So this is really transformational. If you've been in L&D community for a long time, you've been relatively static on the tech stack. Now you're not static, and it's being fueled by innovation, and it's also being fueled by venture capital. And when those two things are moving together, you don't want to own anything, because how do you know what to own? I mean,
right.
Like, how do you know do I own the first AR system, the augmented reality, the first virtual reality? Do I do my own? I mean, what is adaptive? I mean, you got all these buzzwords, that are out there in the market, artificial intelligence. How can you buy fast enough or build fast enough to keep up? It's almost like the space of, that's why I love the concept of build versus buy as in buy, or lease, as I like to call it, because it allows you to have the flexibility as the world advances. You're not beholden to that solution. And again, if you've done the right learning architecture, literally you're unplugging, single sign-on, unplugging your LMS integration, and you are done. You're out the door, that vendor's gone, and you've moved on to the next great shiny object, and it cost you nothing. You got a ton of value.
Well, hopefully you're not just moving on to a shiny object. Hopefully that's not what you're doing. But yes, I get what you're getting at. The point is, right, and that's the whole thing, it is a shift. We're looking at this more from an ecosystem standpoint of, hey, we don't just have an LMS anymore and that's it. And so we can buy it or build it because it's not really going to change that much. Even LMSs now. I mean, I've been in situations where by the time you get to a purchase decision, you're looking at the thing you thought was the right thing and you go, the market's changed. Like, I don't even know that this is the right thing to do anymore. Right, which goes back to, I think, I'm curious from a tech standpoint, and I know we're totally nerding on the tech on this right now, which is probably fine, is what people ask me this question. And so I'll throw it back to you. How frequently do you think an L&D organization should be reevaluating their tech stack?
Wow. At a minimum threshold annually. And when I think about that is, it's not reviewing the tech stack at its core. It's reviewing what else is missing from our solution set that we need to reach our end learner, right? And I think it's different for me than reviewing the tech stack. Yeah. I would focus in on, do I have the right tools necessary to essentially reach my audience? And am I so dissatisfied with my anchor, and that's what I call the LMS, that I need to reevaluate that? I actually personally believe that with the LMS industry the way it is, that there's no value in replacing your LMS unless it doesn't fit your long-term architecture. Because, with the advent of all learning experience portals, like you had DegreeOn recently, I saw, and they're a phenomenal product, bolt on an LMS that basically gives you a powerful LMS solution without letting the LMS do its back end work, which is really more for the LMS is not more about for the compliance officer. It's more about for tracking purposes. I would leave my LMS alone, but I would look up at the learning experience portal. I would look up at my gamification solution, my micro learning solution, my augmented reality, my virtual reality, my adaptive, I can keep adding these words, right? And that's where I'd spend my time, right? That sphere outside the LMS, making sure that I had the right products to meet my needs. And every year I check in, because I want to ensure, first, if I'm partnering with a vendor, that their roadmap is matching my goals and objectives, right? Things change, right? Yeah. Nobody could change direction, right? All of a sudden, mLevel could decide we're no longer going to offer, not doing this, by the way, listeners, we're no longer going to offer gamification. Well, that means every customer who bought us for gamification now should evaluate what we do, right? Yep. Like verbatim. I'm just giving an example, probably one that's not more hard to stress.
No, it's a fair point.
Right? Or my favorite one, like the learning record store, right? Everyone was shopping for learning record stores. Well, do you really need a learning record store if you have a data warehouse and you maintain it internally? I mean, again, it's those type of things in evaluating learning tech that I think needs to be done, not the core fundamentals. I think the core fundamental of an LMS, that's like a once every 3-year event. If you want to go and look at it, make sure you're the right version, make sure maybe you want to do a price shopping event to make it competitive, whatever. But really, it's about those solutions on top of the LMS, to me, that where you really want to spend your time.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've found, and this has been extremely helpful for every organization that I've been with, is mapping out that capability. And I think sometimes when people do that, they pick vendor targets first. They're like, oh, we need this. And it's like, no, what do we need in our, we need to be able to do this. We need to be able to do that. And then, like you said, then every year you can say, okay, what are our priorities for this year? What can we not do? Or what are we struggling to be able to do because we don't have that capability? Not we don't have this platform or things like that. But then, yeah, you can plan towards that and say, well, maybe this year is the year we really need to focus on analytics, or this is the year we need to focus on this capability. Then you can actually start having an intelligent decision around, okay, then who are the players that are good in that space that we should be talking to?
Exactly. And I love the capabilities. All right. I think
everybody's listening like gamification and microlearning, and you're talking about SaaSes and tech capabilities. But again, I think that's an important discussion to have, because when you think about it, if you're not doing that groundwork first, then getting to the gamification microlearning, then it is just chasing the shiny object, because you're just running around going, hey, I went to, Learning 2019 and everybody was talking about adaptive, so we should do adaptive without really understanding how it fits. So it was important context, I think, to set up. But let's talk about this one, because I remember when we sat down and talked about this, we said, microlearning, such a vague word in terms of what that means. So far as it's been trademarked to the point of, okay, but what is microlearning? So when you look at it, one, how would you define it? But also, how does mLevel look at microlearning?
Yeah, so let's first talk about the definition of microlearning itself. It's really taking content and breaking it into bite-sized chunks for consumption,
Yep.
Small bits by the end user, which is really important to understand that in microlearning, it's not just taking, and I love Carl Kopp's, Carl Kopp was an expert on this category. We talk a lot about this. Carl's philosophy is you don't just take a course piece of content and cut it, and if it was an hour-long content, and just chop it in 5-minute intervals. That's not the goal of microlearning, right? It's not to say, oh, I've accomplished microlearning. My 60-minute course is now, sorry, do the math is, I don't know, I can't do math, 14 or something like that, or 15, I don't know, 12 individual 5-minute courses. That is not a microlearning event, right? So microlearning is taking information and delivering in bite-sized chunks, but it's also got to be designed so it can be consumed in bite-sized chunks, right? So it's important to understand that when you look at a course, maybe a 60-minute course, that the microlearning of a 60-minute course may wind up being 2 to 3 5 to 10-minute sessions versus one 60-minute session, okay? And I would look at it from the perspective of, so that's my philosophy, is you kind of take the core, to define it, break it into bite-sized chunks. Now, when we think about it at mLevel, we think about how do we design templates and environments to allow companies to make it easy to deploy microlearning solutions. How do we put them in a box, right? How do we force the designer a box? And I actually think microlearning is really a foreign skill set to the L&D community, and I think I know why, okay?
Let's hear it.
So it's not the L&D community's fault. I want to take everybody on this podcast. It's not your fault. You all went to college and got a degree. It's your professor's fault. Right? Why? Because your professor taught you in an environment where you learned in a classroom, and you learned how they want to teach you how to learn. And they taught you that's the way people learn, because we've been learning that way for not a short eons, right? And what's funny is that these instructors don't bring the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve into their conversation as an instructional design curriculum, right? So you go through, you learn how to be an instructional designer, you learn from a teacher, you learn that everything's a large format, then you get to a corporation, and if you're here for a long time, you start learning about how to deliver things in instructor-led training, which are very long, drawn-out formats. If you can see this, I'm drawing my hand out, right? Or you're told to do e-learning, which is instructor-led training in long, drawn formats now through a computer. And now they've said to you, wait, there's a new buzzword, microlearning. Go break everything into bite-sized chunks. Well, where does that fundamentally come from? You're not taught how to think about content delivery in bite-sized chunks, right? So we try and help that by kind of forcing the box, right? Kind of saying, okay, look, here's a template with 10 questions only required for it. You can only write 10 questions for it. So it's an experience where you can only write 10. Right.
Yeah, you're almost forcing people through the exercise of, you have this, you have to somehow make decisions to get it to this.
Right. And it's a great way to think about the whole concept. So we try and teach that skill set by building templates that have restrictions. We do provide ones that don't, so they kind of blend themselves back and forth. but we try and think about how do we restrict the environment. We also think microlearning has a place in the learning ecosystem. It's not everything in the learning ecosystem. So our philosophy actually roots into how do we make it so that microlearning become a part of traditional learning programs or delivered in the flow of work, right? Because those where microlearning opportunities are significant. So philosophically, we also think about integration strategies that help the learning development partner be able to easily deploy it where the learner is versus having to think about how do I get this into this.
I got to go find it.
Got to go find it, right? Because that's another thing. We have this kind of concept that we believe that human beings will go search for the content they're looking for. And I love human beings because we're all in the same equal group here, but most people are not that curious about improving their performance. It's the other thing that the L&D and practitioner is burdened by. The burden is that by nature as an educator, you're extremely curious, right? So
that's why you got into it.
That's exactly right. And you said, oh my God, I can help other people learn better.
I'm like this. Everybody else is like this. I just need to show them the way or give them the tool.
Right. And if that was the case, everyone would be a teacher and everyone would be there. And again, it's a little bit about helping us understand the audience, which is kind of why when we think about microlearning, it's all about what's the delivery method inside of there. All of a sudden, your microlearning is just video wrapped up in shorter bite-sized chunks in the larger video. It's not microlearning, it's a short video. And I know people who are in the video, I don't know, that's microlearning. Okay, well, great. Why? What learning?
I mean, I guess you could technically, depending on how you define it, you're like, well, I guess, yeah, it's micro, but that's not conceptually what we're talking about of true effective microlearning.
Well, I would argue that where's the learning and watching?
Fair. No, you know what, that's a fair point. And actually I'm with you on that because I think that's another myth that we could probably talk about for another show is the fact that consumption of content alone is not where the learning happens.
And so microlearning is a perfect example of the small YouTube videos that people put up to teach you how to do stuff. They're actually the best world version of what we think about for microlearning. If you're going to be in the microlearning space, it's combining content with application, right? And again, if you're going to build a video, how do I get someone to actually go step by step to go through it, right? When you watch a video, I am not the most handy person in the world, so YouTube's like a godsend to me. So if I ever get a task from my wife that says, hey, you got to go do X, and believe me, those tasks are very small. First thing I'll place is on YouTube. I actually deployed a new mesh router last night in our house, right? And I watched the YouTube video first, but I actually paused it and was able to go take action throughout that interaction. It was a 3.5-minute video. It took me 9.5 minutes to set up the whole network. I was pretty darn excited. That's microlearning to me. And we think about that at mLevel. How do we get that real application? How do we get someone going through a short video, then answering questions, short video, then answering? So they're applying and taking advantage of this microlearning experience. And we're doing it in a very targeted manner to get them in the flow of work, right? So we're getting them where they're in need of it, not just necessarily where they're searching for it in the course catalog.
Which that goes, if you think about it, that's actually going beyond just the platform, right? I mean, that's a whole fundamental shift. And I think that's something that almost on every episode I've had so far, we've gotten into and talked about the fact that this is a shift for L&D that they have to make in the way they're thinking about what kind of content are we designing or what types of problems are we solving? Because if you don't change that, you're just going to end up with a microlearning platform that you're just putting your 60-minute course now broken into 25-minute. That's 120, but you get the point. You chop it up and then you just put it in a microlearning platform, and it's still just as ineffective as it was in its full length version.
Right, and that's exactly right. And then what happens is you go back and see microlearning doesn't work, right? So that's the outcome. And I think you talked about, we even talked about at the beginning, we talked about capabilities versus tools, right? What are you trying to accomplish, right? What's the goal? Why do you think microlearning will be a better solution? Usually microlearning is brought up when there's a lack of engagement or there's a frustration from the audience around the time it takes to consume it. I don't have the time to go through all this training, make it shorter. I don't have direct engagement. We'll think microlearning would work on that, right? It's kind of reacting to a pain versus proactively saying, hey, you know what? Let's just look at new hire orientation, right? Some companies have 1 day of new hire orientation. Some companies have 6 weeks of new hire orientation. Some of that new hire orientation could be in a classroom for 5 to 6 hours a day of learning stuff. Nobody's learning it for 5 to 6 hours a day and remembering the darn thing. But companies aren't changing. Microlearning should live, is a great place in new hire orientation, right? First of all, the associate is as passionately excited about joining your company. If they're not, they should have joined, but let's not go into that philosophy for a moment.
Right.
That everyone was excited to join.
They're at their best day.
Best day
ever.
Day one. Day one, best day ever. And we are taking that day one
and killing it.
Killing it. instead of making it short, interactive, fun experiences where we get them excited about their continued adventure for day 2, right? Instead, we put them in this mundane classroom-like experience. And then when we think about microlearning, we don't incorporate it. It's a great opportunity in new hire orientation to shrink the investment it takes to get an employee on board through microlearning, giving them self-paced study, giving them fun things to do that give them instant reward and application and satisfaction. That's where microlearning has a great application. And it's unfortunate because it's a place where I think that a lot of companies don't think about how do I apply and what do I do best there.
Right. Or if they do it, they take the 6 hours of classroom content and chop it into 300 pieces and say, hey, now go spend day 1 sitting at your computer in front of the LMS and take these 300 courses, which now feels even more overwhelming than the 6. And then again, then it gets the blame of, well, that was less effective.
And even worse, because at least with the classroom, there's an instructor at the top of it. So
and good snacks, right? There's usually good snacks.
So now I'm taking this person and I'm shoving them into a queue and telling them to spend their day on video. Great. They're going to be a long-time lifer at your company. No, there's sarcasm there. But so yeah, I know that was a very long-winded answer to microlearning at a core, but that's kind of our mindset is how do we think about delivering templates, how frameworks, and then how to make it easy for the person to deploy it in the work. And then something else that we kind of bring to bear as part of this is that microlearning provides a tremendous opportunity for analytics and to react to analytics. So, and notice there's 2 different terms there, right? So if I create quality microlearning experiences that measure the outcome, and again, I'm going to be only focused on measurement of the outcome, and we can debate the other forms of microlearning later on if you want. But if we talk about the measurement piece, if I say to Chris, you're a new hire, right? And I've got you through and I've designed a series of microlearning exercises for you to complete day 1. If I'm doing it correctly, I should generate data that allows me to see what you learned from your day 1 experience. What's the best way to make a day 2 experience start for an employee? If I start day 2 and you walk in the office, Chris, and I'm like, hey, Chris, welcome back. So excited to have you back for day 2 of new hire orientation. Before we jump into the new content today, I want to jump in and cover a few points from yesterday's session because I just think it'd be good to do some.
I missed it.
Like, you as the employer are going to be like, oh my God, these people really do. They know about me. They value me, right? And I think that microlearning gives this tremendous jump-off point for analytics, right? To react to, because if you design a series of good courses and analytics, you can actually do unbelievable things to help that employee feel a more personalized connection, regardless of whether they're a new hire or they're learning about a new product, right? Microlearning has this value that we, in traditional large format or traditional learning delivery, we don't get that luxury of, right? Because creating analytics from that is harder, and we don't have the time because we're spending all of our time in the classroom or all of our time creating this wonderful course.
Well, and it's hard to get surgical about what's working, what did people, because it's just a big block. It's just a big black box. You can't really see what components of it. Okay. So with this, and then we'll get, I do want to look and talk about how that is, right? Because it's one thing to say, hey, this is our philosophy on it. This is what microlearning looks like. And then it's like, okay, but we talked a little bit about how we chunk that down, but we can see that in the platform. But before we do, I want to jump over to the gamification one, because that's another buzzword, if you will. And, there's even there's game design and then there's gamification. So, when you look at all of this stuff, when this first took off, as I saw it taking off, it was almost that whole, I guess I've always struggled with gamification in general because I looked at it, back again, before I would want to acknowledge the date. But when it first started coming out, like when I was doing it, it was, we're bringing Jeopardy into the classroom. And people were so excited, like people loved the Jeopardy. It made everything so great. And it was like, but what were we trying to achieve with that? So when you look at gamification, one, how does mLevel tackle gamification? And then what outcomes is it driving towards when you combine it with microlearning?
Yeah, so Chris, I think you brought up a couple of different things. You talked about game-based learning and gamification. They get muddled. And it's because who could really differentiate between the two, but they're completely different things. And our platform addresses both of those. So a game-based learning experience is kind of like that Jeopardy environment where you kind of, you're asking questions.
It's a game.
It's a game. You're playing it, and to advance and get a qualifying good score and be able to get the good grade, you have to be able to answer the questions. Right. So let's be clear that that's a game-based learning experience, probably like a Jeopardy, any activity where to advance, you have to get the questions right to get your points moving forward. Right. When you talk about gamifying something, you're talking about bringing game type elements into the system as well as what I will call for people who really don't think about gamification, make it easier, a loyalty style program reward into the platform. Right. So gamification is not new. Gamification is a buzzword that was brought into the.
Been around for a long time.
Gamification has been in the food service space, the travel space forever. Right. I mean, airlines, hotels, restaurants.
Right. That's not unique to learning at all.
Not at all. And it's usually the motivator to get people to come to your location and establishment to choose your brand over somebody else's brand, right? They made it in the fitness industry. The Fitbit's fully gamified. They've gamified to the iWatch, whatever they call it now. It's all gamified, right? Everywhere you go, you're gamified, which is why gamification has a place in learning, because basically you're just bringing the standard of what everybody's used to the table. But what gamification is, right, when at your core is you're doing things like leaderboards. You're doing things like badges. You're doing things like stars. These are extra motivators for people to perform, to relieve what we call social currency in the organization that could sometimes be turned into actual currency, right? So you can use gamification to build points and rewards and then redeem actual product at the other side of it, right? But it's really designed to motivate people to participate more. And really the power of games and gamification is what I call the repeat engagement model. If you design your program right, you are going to get someone to do something more than once in training. That is a novelty. Imagine if I get someone to do something 4 times. So I'll give an example. We do a lot of programs, and you'll see me show you an activity called Block Party. Block Party is an activity where people blow up blocks. I won't reveal the company's names, but I've seen literally people play Block Party as high as 250 times during a single training program. and literally, you know, the average is probably 5 to 8 on that one activity. Now, what happens there is the learners doesn't think they're learning. They actually started playing a game to move up the leaderboard, right? They saw them staggering the leaderboard and they wanted to win, or they started having fun. And lo and behold, what's happening is as they're answering questions along the way, that information is being driven to their rote memory. As it's being driven to their rote memory, they're able to respond, and actually I won't use the word regurgitate, but I'm going to use the word regurgitate, that information on demand. They don't know how, right? And we've seen this. It's there, and they don't understand how it got there, but it's there. And it's the same reason why when you're a kid, right, and or even an adult, if you want to learn a new skill, let's say you want to learn, let's say, Chris, tomorrow you decide you're going to learn how to play guitar. You've got so much extra free time now, you're going to learn how to play guitar, right? What's going to happen? You probably can try and self-teach yourself, but you're going to sign up for lessons. You're going to go take practice, and then you're going to have lessons. And at the end of every lesson, the teacher's going to say, now go home and practice the 5 key chords that I just taught you. And when you come back, I want to start right there. And so, because you've got this pressure now, you're going to sit at home and you're going to, you know, jam away.
Over and over and over and over again.
And what are you driving? You're driving rote memory. You're driving this practice, this skill set, right? So gamification kind of gives you this unique opportunity to take pieces of content that deserve to be in the rote memory, punched in there long term, and make it part of the fabric, right? How do I get someone to do it? Gamification is a motivator, right? No one wants to be last on a leaderboard. Doesn't mean I always want to be first. You can't deal with the win. There are people ultra competitive. You don't have to worry about them. They want to win everything. So the moment you put the leaderboard up, those ultra competitive.
Right, they're going for #1 spot.
Most people live in the box of what they don't want to be last.
So just not at the bottom.
Not at the bottom. I don't want to be the person when my boss goes in and scrolls to the bottom of the leaderboard and sees Jordan at the bottom of the leaderboard, only earned 1 star and didn't get, you know, the points. I got to make points. Sure. Now, if everybody's got 3 stars and now everybody's just competing because they want to get extra points, whatever, great. But that gets that person, again, come back into that platform more than 1 time, right? You get this constant flow of doing it. If you're designing it right, that social currency of badges is recognition for completion. The leaderboards drives that engagement. The stars gives them that median sense of satisfaction, things you traditionally can't do in a what I'll call e-learning program that doesn't have gamification as part of it.
Okay. So it's a combination, and it is an important distinction because I think gamification, like you said, gets thrown around a lot when sometimes you're really talking about game-based learning, and you need to understand they are 2 separate things. Now, a lot of times they're combined, which is what you talked about. You can combine the 2 to get the added benefits of both, but that is 2 distinctly different things, and you're not necessarily just doing both because you did something, you know, with games.
Right, and it's got to have a purpose and a reason. Why are you using the games? Right. Again, I always start by why? Why are we doing it? Problem solving. Am I solving an engagement problem? Okay, great. I have an engagement problem. Is gamification the best solution to solve engagement? Maybe.
It might be because, right, if that, and that's where I personally have experienced gamification being the right tool for the job, where you say, hey, we've made sure we had the right stuff. We know we're shooting in the right direction. Our biggest challenge is we're trying to capitalize a larger percentage of people's attention because we need them to come back to it. And then, okay, yeah, if that's the gap, then that may be an appropriate solution to it. Right. I think the other thing, though, that you talked about, that when I've deployed this in the past, where you really have to be objective from an L&D standpoint, because a lot of times it's easy to get caught up in what we think is so important or what we think is relevant. I remember one time I was in a program, and they had, gamified it and game-based it. So it was a game. And I remember going, why is this information? This information is completely irrelevant to me. So yes, I'm playing the game because at the time I could get, an Apple, I don't remember what it was, like iPod if I was number one. But at the end of the day, once I won the iPod, it all just purged because the information was completely irrelevant. So I think that's an important note to make, is that you still need to do your due diligence to make sure that you're putting the right things in place, because otherwise it's not driving the right outcomes.
So think about compliance, right? You can gamify compliance to essentially theoretically drive more participation in compliance events at a faster rate. It's a very popular way to do it, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? But you don't take a step back, driving all the way back to microlearning as a conversation, and actually think about what are the parts I want to gamify, and what are the most valuable, most important parts of compliance that matter.
What is the stuff we want to burn into your brain so you never forget it?
Not everything is the most important, right? It can't. Not all. If you talk to the chief security officer and you're doing cybersecurity, of course, everything's the most important. That's not true, right? What's your number one variable of risk, right? Okay, great. If we decide phishing's and understanding that emails being sent to the network are the number one risk to the company for hackers doing it, let's gamify that information so that we know that when we are done with this program, we've given a general overview into how to protect and open files. We get a general overview of where to store stuff. We do all the things, information practices, but we're going to double down on phishing because it is the number one pain point that our organizations suffer from in cybersecurity. So let's double down on that. Let's make sure we have bite-sized chunk content. Let's make sure it's gamified, because we want Chris to take that program when he wins that Fitbit or Apple Watch or iPhone or iPad, whatever, iPod, whatever technology or gift card, whatever it is. When he wins it, the reward is Chris is less likely to click on a link coming in. He'll be so aware of what potential solutions are coming after when the hackers are coming, right? Most hacks today come from email. We're going to double down on that, right? So it's taking that, what's the outcome? What am I trying to reach within it? How do I use gamification games as a weapon? Because if you use it too often, by the way, guess what? Right. Now
loses its effectiveness.
Loses effectiveness, right? You're like, oh, okay. All right, great. And again, we can go into this. There's some emotional reaction, right? But you got to be smart when you use it, because it's not for all things for all people.
No. So, right. And you brought it up. It was an area I was going to go into, that, again, going back to that use case, the best decision isn't to say, hey, let's look at our whole L&D portfolio and let's just gamify all of it and just blast it out to the organization, because gamification's the hot thing.
Yeah, I mean, high value opportunities, right? I look at L&D and I say, okay, we're going to have a library of content available for people to learn. Got it. Okay. So I've got a portfolio of content. I'm partnering with a myriad of content providers. There's so many of them out there, Open Sesame's, you name it. They've got libraries upon libraries of content, right? So I can give content resources to my team to grow. Where am I going to move the needle for the company? By investing in technology through learning development for training outcomes that move the dollar forward. What I mean by that is, does it help the company sell more? Does it help the company save money? Does it help the company protect itself? Right? These are the things that L&D has to think about, and that's where you invest your dollars. Where am I moving the needle? Right? How quickly can I move the needle? So let's take a company that sells some type of widget, right? And the company's now about to do a major release on an upgrade to the widgets. And in order to pay for the upgrade to the widgets, everybody's got to sell it, right? So why not spend my energy, my custom development, my gamification, my microlearning, anything that matters in the space where I can get the most value back for it, right? I can quantify it. I can say, I can quantify that I can move the needle from L&D, and this is why I'm making this investment. So I'm not asking you for money for the sake of just asking for money. I'm building you a mousetrap, leveraging whatever products, point solutions, whatever you do, to drive the needle. I'm going to sell more widgets, but I'm going to be ready to move, and I'm not going to worry about everything. I'm going to worry about educating on the widget, overcoming the objections, and whatever else that third chevron is. And
whatever those be, asking open-ended questions versus closed-ended. It's something like that.
now I'm going to take that and I'm going to say, okay, great. So product knowledge is something I definitely want to gamify because I want people to learn it like the back of their hand, right? I want them to be able to not use a knowledge management system. I want them to be able to not have to bend down and go on their iPad and search to see what the product does in the retail store.
But even that, you might not gamify every component of product knowledge. You might say, what is the critical information about our product that you should never have to look up? If anybody asked you anything, you can just rattle it off the top of your head because bam, that's not all of it. That's this percentage of it.
Well, you'll address the majority of the audience, by the way, because most of the people you're hiring are not going to remember the top 10 things anyway, right? So if you need more emotional knowledge, if it's a complex sale, they need to know nothing because a complex sale, they're basically going to rely on the sales engineer to help support them deploy it. Even I would argue in the retail store, if I'm selling a device, right? You know, I have to be an expert, but I also have teams in that retail store where I can go
lean on them.
I can lean on my manager. I can lean on the tech expert who's in and say, hey, you know, I've got this customer. You know, I've talked to him about the Samsung new TV that's 4K UHD, but they've got this neat thing where they want to hang it sideways outside. You know,
I don't need to memorize that because I can talk to our installation crew and they can talk about it.
Sideways outside in the back. I'm going to go get Jimmy from, you know, the team back there, and he's going to come help you out right now. And the customer really appreciates that, by the way. But as a training person, you focus on doing your job, getting that top 10, and now you've got a great customer experience moving forward.
Okay. Good. Yeah, these are all great points. And I think this again goes back to when I originally posted, we were talking about this. Sometimes gamification and microlearning get a bad rap. And I don't think, my personal opinion is, it's not the tool's fault. It's that when you use it wrong, it doesn't work well. And these are all important elements when you talk about, hey, how do you use this the right way so that it is driving that effectiveness? And did you see what I did there? See how I brought the SaaS conversation full circle, right? It's about prioritization. And yes, is there a time to build? Sure, there's nothing wrong with it, but you don't do it all the time. Is there a time to gamify or do microlearning? Absolutely. But you don't do it, you know, all the time because that's not the right tool for the job.
Yeah. I agree.
There was something else I was going to ask you about it. And okay. Yeah. So this is right. This conversation's fantastic. And as we go further, one of the big things I always look at is what are some of the things that if an organization is saying, hey, I'm listening to this is jiving. I think microlearning or gamification might be a gap that we are looking to prioritize for these types of things. What are some of the things that inevitably you might see an organization think they're on the right path and they just didn't realize, oh, we needed to prepare for this or we didn't do this the right way? Because I see that happen. And when it does, a lot of times what happens is the finger gets pointed at you know, the tech. Oh, well, the tech failed. You know, it was the tech's fault. And it's like, well, really, this was something that you needed to do to be successful in using this capability. What are some of those things?
Yeah. So the general practice I see is that when someone buys a tech for the buzzword reasons,
okay.
My boss says I have to have mobile learning. My boss says I have to have gamification. My boss says I have to have micro. Those are first telltale sign that we're headed into harm's way, even if we're selected. There's a vendor sitting on the side. I can read the tea leaves, right? Because that's someone who's disinterested in before they started, right? No one likes to be told what to do. So first, make sure you have a purpose and a plan, right? I think we've talked about this multiple times. But also selecting the right type of content and leaning on the partner to understand it, right? Just because your team says we need gamification doesn't necessarily mean that you can't come back to them and say, hey, I've met with multiple vendors on this. Actually, you know, one or two of them actually said, I don't know if I'd start with this content. It's not really designed to be micro-learning and gamified. It's a real struggle. Okay. We had a former customer, you know, in our early days, and we're guilty of sin, by the way, I will tell you as a vendor side, especially the early stage vendor companies who don't have a lot of history and traction, all revenue is not created equal. All opportunities are not created equal. But in the early stage,
I love the transparency. I love it.
When you're in the early stage, you just want to eat, right? So you're all interested in putting food on the table, so everything's equal. It doesn't matter. So we had a customer come to us in our early days, and we'd probably be better served now on SAP super user certification. Now, 4 years removed from that opportunity, you couldn't pay me to sign up for that with the technology we offered in 2014 or 15. Today, we're in a different place, but it was a terrible program selection, right? Now, with my hindsight 2020, right, I didn't do a great job of being a partner to that client, right? And say, hey, look, this is just not great content, right? You want to win. The job in L&D, by the way, when you're doing this, you always want to win. You want positive outcomes. Even blaming the vendor doesn't help you. Doesn't help. No one remember. So it was all mLevel's fault. Okay, great. Who selected mLevel?
Right.
Why? Oh, so now you're actually has a double negative there. If you're
passing the buck.
You're passing the buck. So actually, what the person hears on the other end is not only this person failed in this program, they don't even have the ability.
They failed at selecting the right tool.
Right. So ask the question. Make sure the vendor is comfortable. And if you're signing up, and think about what content and what audience is going to respond well to this. Right. If you're going to start gamification off with your C-suite, probably not a great place to do it. Most C-suite professionals think too highly of themselves. I sit in the C-suite, so I can tell you, think too highly of themselves to want to be gamified, right? Do this. Don't start, if you're a hospital, don't start with your doctors, right? Why? Doctors don't really need to be taught the value of education. They spent 8 to 12 years, whatever, 16 years being educated, going through the process. You can see where I'm getting at here, right?
Yep.
Audience matters. So don't, think about that, okay? Think about, where do I win with this, right? Where do I win with this piece of content? If I'm going to get into learning and I'm going to get into gamification, I'm going to get into microlearning, I want to win. Every project that I touch, I want to win on. I want to be looked at as a hero. I want 5 stars. I want everyone asking for Jordan, the instructional designer, Jordan, the performance consultant, Jordan, whatever, my learning architect. I want them saying, oh my God, is Jordan on my project? Right? Because what does that do? Our goal is to create long-term career viability and a pathway. And if we just buy technology for the sake of a buzzword, because somebody told me to, and we don't think about the audience and the plan, we're just creating failure. And even if it is the vendor's fault, it always comes back full circle. They always remember the person who chose the vendor. They always come back to it. We all know this. I think about career longevity. That's the word I was looking for.
Longevity. There it is.
And I think that this is an opportunity. I think this kind of speaks to that. Be really smart, right? Don't say yes necessarily. If your boss says, hey, we want to gamify it because we're having terrible engagement around compliance. Great. What does that mean? What are your goals? What do you want as the output, right? Because there's all different types of solutions out there. Just take the time before you go deploy to make sure that the audience is your target audience for it, the content's going to sing well with it, and that make sure you held your vendor accountable for that selection process, right? Make sure if someone doesn't say to you, no, that's not good content, and test them. Like literally come up with a test that is not the right content from everybody else who told you no, and see if they say yes. If they said yes, they're probably not a good long-term partner to go with, because they're trying to make sure they eat.
They're just trying to make sure they eat. So make sure you pick someone who's not just trying to eat.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's been my experience over the years too, where I've made bad decisions. I'll admit there have been times I've thought, hey, let's do this. And for me, one thing I've found that's worked well is do those, right? Don't go all in. And I think you hit on that. Don't go all in right away. Figure out where, like you said, you can play to win and then build on that. Because the worst thing you can do is we're going gamification on everything. And you go out with a colossal bang because maybe it did work really well in a 5 or 10% niche, but the other 90 or 95% failed so colossally, nobody pays attention to where you won. And now you're stuck with egg on your face.
Exactly.
Well, let's actually look at the platform. Let's pull it up. And I know I'll have more questions as we get into it. I've used mLevel, but it's been a while. So I'd love to see, refresh my mind on what it is. And as we get into it, we can hit on a couple things as we go. So let me know. And I know the 3 things that you really dive into on your website is microlearning, gamification, and analytics. So we'll see how far we get with each of those, but at least a little bit of a teaser on what that looks like.
Yeah. So Chris, I've kind of got to start here. I'm going to start us in the content creation piece because I think that's an important part to start with.
It is.
Right. And we're going to make what's consumed last because I hate to say this, but while the end user is going to consume it, we have to get our minds retrained in how we build and think about deploying and what matters on the measurement piece. So we're going to start in the build process, right? So let's say you were an mLevel customer and you were building a program on workplace safety, right? So this is in our demo environment. And I would hit the new button here for this to populate, but I'm going to hit one of the existing programs just for time purposes.
And so this is on the build side, the developer side.
So I've been assigned this mission, no pun intended. I've got to get my details together for what I want to train my audience on related to workplace safety, right? So is everything else, you got to give it a name, your course a name. We call it a mission here at mLevel because everything's about the M. But hey, that's our jam. If you want to call it a course, we can go with that too. And And then you got to give a welcome message to the learner. Now, there's a lot of things in our product that we think about. Remember I talked about the democratization of technology, right?
Yes.
We're going to ask you a couple questions up front in the advanced configuration section that you don't have to answer necessarily day one, but we like to make sure that's important. Remember I talked about this concept of you don't need to always have a gamification or achievements, right? So what we want to do is say, hey, do I want badging? Here's my yes button, right? So now I've enabled badging for the system. We're going to give out achievements. And then I get to determine how many stars are required, right? Because every program's got different measurement. Your compliance programs may say, look, I need 100%. They don't get a badge till they're 100% complete. But your sales team, your sales leader may say, look, I just want a bunch of Bs. So give everybody badges who gets 80s. I want them on the field. I don't want them, sitting on the sidelines. I'll deal with the other 20% they miss. Again, we shouldn't be rigid, right? So we give you the flexibility. Again, the same thing on leaderboards, right? So you get to build leaderboards, et cetera, right? And you just can continue to go through. And we think about everything as plug and play. Here's a great one. Leaderboards, by the way, won't work for every program. You're a global company. You're working in Europe. I got to tell you right now,
GDPR
are going to slap you down. But I got US people. Okay, great. I disable it for my European people. I activate it for my US people. Again, I think about this again, how flexible can I be to get my gamification?
Now, do you have to create a separate mission based on that, or can you configure based on audience?
Well, first of all, we're going to get to that in a second. So we would recommend creating a second mission anyway for the European presence if you're turning the leaderboard off, because you can't have, Europeans can't see it's your jealousy factor, right? I mean, you don't want FOMO occurring in your organization. You want to avoid FOMO at all costs. And so I would suggest that, look, they're already different.
If you're going to do it, keep them separate.
Right way. Yeah. So now I've got my foundation. Branding's pretty straightforward, right? I can pick a brand for my template to come in, again, really easy, pick my hex color in, etc. I can deal with my mentor. I'm not going to jump into that. Now, the moment you've got the foundation in place, and again, you can always go backwards. We ask you to think about what activities you want to deploy. Remember I talked about templates, right? So now you have a series of templates, all of which have descriptions. And notice right here, at least 10 questions, at least one question, at least 10 questions, right? Here's 18 questions, right? You can keep going down the list, and each template's going to have a different requirement put upon it, right? And a different outcome. What we did in our early days is we kind of locked everything in Bloom's taxonomy. We've now said, you know what, we're going to give you the flexibility to pick any different question type you want across every template, but it's still a template, right? Okay. And so let's look at like one of those templates, that block party template. I talked about that famous template. We want to make it easy to build a game. This is going to deploy a game for you, which I'll show, hopefully, if we have time, what the end output looks like. But here's the game. I can give it a subtitle. Here I've chosen not to. I can give welcome instructions to my learner as they come in. And then again, look below, I've got my star value right here.
Okay.
Right, so now I've set that gamification. I've given another message here to the audience when they've come in, and I've got activity branding. Now, the next thing you do once you have an activity is you've got to questions. Right, so now I had to have how many? 10. I wrote 15. Okay, but I put it in the box. And again, really simple. Here's your question type I picked. This is what we call a basic image question. I uploaded an image. I tagged it. Now, we do something really important here. Tagging allows you to do a couple things. One, from an analytics perspective, it gives us the ability to kind of heat maps around different tags. So we can tell you within a tag of safety laws and Georgia laws, what particular questions you're asking and what the results are and answers there. But also, if it's a question where you've got multiple choice over here, it'll tell you how many different questions you've created for that. But again, here's your write your question. Is it correct or incorrect? Do I want feedback, yes or no? Right? And every question template that you pick in our system, right, is going to give you this wonderful little framework template. Okay? Easy to do, again, no code, and tag it so you get the tags. Right now, watch, I'm going to shrink you over here. Notice the tag distribution. So it's showing me the questions I'm asking where the tag already exists of working with power tools. So as a designer now, I also have a quick hint to go look at, right? And see what's in front of me in my palette. We thought that would be very helpful to the designer so that they don't write too many questions about one topic. Then when they're done with that topic, they're going to assign it to a user and they're going to publish it off across all modalities. Okay? And I'm really simplifying the build process, but again, it's simple there. Now, what's interesting for us at mLevel is, and I know Chris.
So before we go into the analytics piece, so when we talk about this, right, you're creating these questions and delivering that, is that primarily then, through these games, right? It's almost question-based learning, like, hey, here's a question, how did you answer it? And then based on, your response, again, you'd have to put that in there, but to kind of create that learning of, okay, here's what you did. Nope, not right. Or yes, you did it right. Let's move on through that. And it's just kind of a repeat and rinse and repeat over and over of that type of learning.
Well, think about it this way. You can take any other activity,
okay,
and drop it in, right? So I could take video right now and say, you know what? I want to use a video to anchor the learning here. And Chris, I'm going to shrink you again for a second.
No, that's okay.
If I hit it's active and hit save, okay? And now we go back to activities. Notice what I did. I could have someone watch a video.
Okay.
And then have them answer questions about that. And if I wanted to do that, I'd simply come on in here again
and pop that in.
Here's my video.
So you have the ability to build content into it outside of just the questioning.
And I think it's important to note that we actually recommend now to a lot of our learners, whether they're using video, whether they're using, we have an e-learning module that you can add in an existing XAPI or SCORM package into, or you want to use flashcards. Inside of a microlearning experience, if they're especially as a follow-on or reinforcement, if you're doing that as a targeted learning experience, you want to give them access to the original content if you can, or at least a good refresher, right? One of the reasons we use flashcards is it kind of forces the mind to think about what are the most important items that I want the learner to know inside that anchoring or refreshing exercise along the way, right? So a lot of the questions and answers are the means to an end to trap the data. And we like to give availability to the content to the learner. And I know the next question will be, well, can't I just use and upload my SCORM package into mLevel and then not use my LMS and just have the assessment right next to it? The answer to that is yes. But again, we like to give you flexibility to deploy and create, not just focus on questions and answers only. You can store the original content there as well.
So you answered the question. So in theory, you could could host your content in mLevel. It has the capability to host the content. It doesn't mean you have to. So it could be hosted elsewhere and then you're linking out to it.
That's correct.
Okay.
All right.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'll think of some other ones, but yeah, let's jump to analytics.
Not a problem. So one of the things that I told about, when we started our journey, remember coming from a technologist background, right? So you have to anchor me into the place of saying, I like to think about what is the problem we're trying to solve and how do we build technology to do it? And once we got past the goal of democratizing the technology, making it easy to build, as you just saw, the next thing became about measurement. So when we started our journey, it's getting better today, but really learning was a checkbox survey, smiley face.
Did you do it?
Did you do it? And do you feel happy about it? And those are great things. Did you do it? And do you feel happy about it? But, I come from a world that grew up during what I call the marketing transformation period, where the world went from impressions to conversions and ROI and marketing. Like, I remember being in meeting rooms where the marketer would come in and say, hey, we just put up 3 new billboards. We just bought 14 new ads in local print publications, and we expect sales to go up. And the sales leader would go, sometimes myself, well, that's not necessarily true that we're going to get leads from that. How many leads are we going to get? And they go, we don't know how to measure leads. I don't know. We get impressions. That's what we measure, impressions.
Yeah. How many people looked at it?
People looked at it. How long did they spend looking at it? We're going to tell you how long they spent looking at it. That's great. No, it's not. It doesn't help me in my job at selling unless I know who did what they did, right? So marketing went through this massive transformation where now everything is tracked and measured, and you couldn't sell a marketer on doing a program that wasn't measured, right? So okay. I said to us, we have to challenge us to how do we help learning do the same thing? What's learning's most powerful asset we can give them? And that's access to knowledge, right? And giving them insights into what people don't know about the information they share with, right? We talked about, is a video learning if there's nothing measured inside of it? Just because I've watched content doesn't mean I learned something, right? Yeah. So let's pretend I was an administrator and I just run that workplace safety program. We'll hope everything stayed freshly refreshed here. Of course it didn't, because that's a lot of demos. I'll hit a quick refresh. It's a downside of when you log in before the demo, before the call.
And then we talk for 45 minutes.
If Chris, you and I weren't so chatty, this would have gone much better. No.
Yes, I'm sorry. You can blame me for that one.
So I hit workplace safety, right? And now all of a sudden, watch my data on the screen is going to change, right? Now I'm getting into the topic itself, right? which is cool. Now I've got all that fun data we talked about. Your marketing team wants, how many people clicked on it, how long did they spend time, yay, all that wonderful fluff and stuff, okay? And I don't mean to insult fluff and stuff, but that's just how I view the world.
It has a place. I had a discussion about this the other day. It's not bad. It's just incomplete, right? If that's all you're doing, then it's not enough.
So I look at my roster, and let's say this crazy guy, Jordan, right? He's not learned much. He's got less than 50% right. I want to know what Jordan's struggling with. Like today, if I wanted to do that in a traditional learning world, I literally have to go meet with Jordan and figure out what's going on. I might be able to do an assessment, and if I had the right development team, I might be able to get them to tell me to score it, or I might have to manually do it. Any global organization is not going to manually score anything, and they're going to basically get the end result. But what now I have is I have a heat map on Jordan. I can say Jordan is really struggling around types of protective gear. So let me see, just real quickly, I want to drill into protective gear, and I want to look at he scored. Now, again, this is demo data, so I always tell people, you know, but now I can say, I want to know, I see Jordan got a high score, or let's go back to a bad score. Jordan got only 33% right on February, whatever day this was. I get a quick insight on all the questions he answered, right? So if there was more than one question, it'd all be here right and wrong. You can see why I only got 40%. It's because I didn't finish the drill, right? I was incomplete, right? So this tells me I was incomplete versus another score where I might be wrong, or if I go down here, you know, I might have many more answers into it where I've gotten, you know, I don't know if I'll have more answers. Here you can see where I can got all the questions I got right versus the ones I got wrong. Okay. Get quick insights. Our goal here is to give you a quick picture of what's going on within the learner, right? At this first, what we call performance tab. Okay. The other thing we like to give you as a business is from the instructional designer's perspective, a macro view into how your topic's performing, right? It's great that Jordan's having a problem, but to be fair, I run a global organization and Jordan's one.
I don't have time to dig into every single employee.
Just show me what my company's doing on workplace safety. Well, great. Here's what I taught people about. I taught them about the following topics, right? Interestingly enough, the data's not far off of Jordan's problems, just to be clear. And here are all the concepts I taught, okay? So everything from the reflective vest to the pair of safety goggles. Now, if I go into types of protective gear and say, look, it's still a problem, do me a favor and show me which particular concepts and activities were part of that journey. Now I can see that safety goggles and safety gloves, much bigger issue than reflective vests. Okay. So in my work safety training program,
now you can make smarter decisions about where you might need to go back and reinforce the audience versus just, hey, let's peanut butter spread everybody with workplace safety because clearly they didn't do as well as we wanted.
And then, of course, we want you to give you the opportunity to get granular again, so you can right-click into that, drill into it. And what this will do now is build you every question that was part of the program, right? And again, look over here. Remember, we had a problem with safety gloves, I think it was, and safety goggles, right? Yeah. So if just tell me about the gloves. I don't care about the goggles. Gloves are super important in our organization. If people don't wear them, they're in trouble. Now I hit that button. You have this quick ability to drill into questions, quick to find by who, and then I've got this ability to look at all the question types and see how often they've been answered. And I can go into any question type and say, okay, let me just verify that the question I wrote and the answers I gave were fair and reasonable for the learner. And did it expose any flaws in my content? And of course, if I want to go help the person with the problem, we're going to let you drill through.
Find that.
Right. So again, if you think about that swimming event, we started with performance as an individual, just quick snap. Now we're looking at topic across the board, of course, going down to granular. And then, you know, one of the things you'll find out about our platform, okay, well, we track completion data, but this is just the standard integration we offer to LMSs, so that's there.
Let people know what they did.
Right. But this is the other part of training that's really important, and every company we deal with has what we call groups or cohorts, right? So new hire orientation, my contact center team, my leadership team, I've got teams, right, all across my company. I tend to train very few things across the entire company. Most things are trained in little pockets. So think about groups, right, especially new hire classes. Remember I talked about the opportunity for microlearning, gamification, and new hire? Well, here's a map of the test group. Imagine that was new hire group 1. Here's all the courses they took, right? So here's the class roster. Yeah. I can go in and say, I want to look at Jordan as a macro. So this is every course that Jordan took in mLevel with measurement, right? So now I can say, okay, where do I want to spend time? Wow, Jordan sucks at customer service. Right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, okay. Why does he suck? Well, he hadn't taken the course in a long time. Let's see what he got wrong in this checkout process. Okay. Now I've got the questions right here that I can go help Jordan with, right? And I got 4 out of 11. That's great. You can see that I wasn't doing really well in the program. And again, the goal with this data within our product is essentially to help companies make decisions quicker, right? Remember we talked about, how do I use microlearning? Well, if I use microlearning, I want to solve a problem. I want to know what the problem is. I want to then be able to fix it, either through coaching.
Know if it's getting better.
How do I know? And I don't know. I'm not going to know by if everyone felt good about it, right? Everyone felt good. We got 5s from the group. We got 5s on that training. My net promoter score was a 5. Well, great. What did the company
do? They walk away with the information that you actually need? Are they actually better at doing?
Before I jump out analytics and give you a quick preview into the front end of what's possible, again, it's a template engine, so you can pick whatever you want. Any questions about the analytics you want to cover with your audience?
Not necessarily questions, but I think this is one that I've seen bubble up that it is important to consider. And it goes back to what you talked about from a prioritization standpoint. Because I've seen, when you dig into these analytics, sometimes it creates one of two responses. Either people's eyes light up for one of two reasons. Either they look at it and go, holy smokes, that's way more, I just wouldn't even know where to start with that. Or it's kind of the shiny object, oh my word, just think of all the insights we could get and all this stuff without really thinking through, hey, this kind of drill through, this kind of digging into this, it's no small task to try and do it. So, which is why you want to be strategic about where you're applying these tools, because you could get lost in it very easily. And I've seen people on my own teams where, they're just so embedded in this. And it's like, well, hey, you've just lost yourself in the trees because there's just too much there for you to get in. And what value is that adding? So I think it's just another cautionary tale of you need to be strategic about how you're using it.
Yeah. Any weapon in your arsenal, you need to think about what your end goal is and what you want to reach with it and what value it has. So I think you've hit a nail on the head there. The data can do one of two things: be overwhelming or extremely powerful. And you want to kind of be in the extremely powerful category and know how to use it effectively.
Well, and that's why you want what we talked about earlier. That's why you want to pick the right things, because otherwise you're going to go, hey, look at these analytics. People did really well in this. And if it wasn't even a problem you were trying to solve, it's like, well, who cares? I don't necessarily care that everyone's favorite color is blue. That does not help me. Why did we make that a question in the first place?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we've got a couple minutes left, but I do want to be able to just at least do a quick show of what it looks like for that end user. And my question with the end user is, and you can hit on this while you're talking about it, is when they consume this, we talked a little bit about, it fitting in the work. How does that look? Are they going to an app? Are they, accessing it through an LXP or an LMS? Are they going to a separate website? What does that look like?
If I answer the question with yes, would that be unfair? So
just yes to all of it.
It's kind of our philosophy at mLevel. We didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves to just being an LMS available tool, just being an LXP available tool, so we have our solutions deployed obviously through the LMSs. We probably have, I think now, up to 8 integrations with most major LMSs that allow companies to deploy, capture results. And if it's an LMS distribution, it's generally sent and set as a course. They get a link, they click on the link. If they're using their mobile device, it launches the mobile app. If they're using a tablet or a PC, they have the option, a PC in particular or laptop.
Open another browser window.
Right, in tablet, they get an option for both, right? Because you can play with options, right? Because that tablet has enough real estate to make it valuable. If it's coming out of an LXP, it generally can be an embedded frame experience. So we have situations that are where you've embedded it inside their frame of the site itself.
So it doesn't even feel like you're necessarily bouncing out.
And we do that also in things like SharePoint, which wouldn't be defined as a learning experience portal, but everybody owns it, right?
Yep.
We've also deployed through Slack and Teams, right? So a person puts in the Slack channel. And they can click on the link. When that happens again, they're going to launch whatever device they're on to take the experience. When they're done, they're going to exit out and they're going to go right back to the other experience they're in. Right? There's no portal platform that comes with the mLevel experience for them to go back in and search for other content to go learn. We're very much part of a strategy where we believe integration to help a company deliver learning of work is important.
So your strategy isn't to create the catalog of like, hey, I'm just bored at my desk today. I think I'll go out to the mLevel portal and browse the games.
No, we'd rather have a solution just to build on that where the companies build all that content, but it's integrated into Degreed, and they go to Degreed and they find it through Degreed. Or they find their LMS category catalog at Workday or SuccessFactors or whoever else has catalogs.
Or they're in Salesforce and something relevance there, something like that.
Exactly. Right? We want to, the learner searches, why do we have to, I have a whole different show we can do on too many destinations for learners to go to.
Yeah.
This is our answer to it. We will never build, we don't want another destination. You've got enough destination sites. We don't need more. We are helping the destination sites be stickier, for lack of a better way of putting it. So here's an example. You get 4 activities. There's an anchoring activity. I'm going to jump into that block party once as we kind of covered it up front. But we have 4 activities. We recommend most micro-learning programs have no more than 4 to 6 activities. Why? Okay. Each activity takes between 1 to 3, maybe 5 minutes tops, right? You don't want someone inside of a micro-learning platform for 3 hours, right? So no more purpose. What to do? You just basically redesign your solution unless you use something in our platform called locking. Okay. You use locking in levels, which is another gaming element. If you lock, right, in order to get from A to B, you got to do A versus you get to B, and you got to get a qualifying score in A. Then you can put as many of these activities you want, because then it becomes like micro-learning. However, if you notice where my mouse is dying over here on real estate, we've also designed it to take up at 6 activities to go away to scroll. So 6 is really a good number. At the end of the day, 30 minutes is a long time. I know it doesn't seem like it to traditional learning, but now I'm a learner. I've come in, I've hit play, right? And now I've got that blow up blocks. Like, this does not look like learning except for the question marks, right? So now as a learner, what happens? My instructions are here to blow up the blocks, to unlock the questions, and I'm given some elements of strategy, okay? So I can spend my time thinking about what blocks I want to blow up without questions to create better game mechanics or experiences. Now, dumb strategy, right? Like, I could do something like, here's the question here, and I could go back and do this and watch what I did there. I kind of ruined my cool board, right? So I'm going to go over here. I click on that. Now I get a question. As a learner, I'm asked to get the question. Now, this is really what we call a game learning experience, not a gamified learning experience, more than a game-based learning experience. Okay. I can advance. I may not get a qualifying score to know what I know, but I can actually continue playing without being disrupted, okay? And I always like to think about, when you're doing game-based learning, if the learner can advance, and it's truly not game-based learning to me, because if I can continue to advance to the next level without getting it right, then, you know, what's my thing? So I'm giving you an example here. This is just one game to play, interact, right? I could probably play this for hours. I'll soon earn stars if I get stuff right, but it's fun, right? It's different. Yeah. It's not, you know, and you can see all different types of question types being generated. Very easy for the learner. It's more than just popping a quiz at the end of an e-learning. Right, exactly right, right. And so and what am I doing here, right? You can see my points are going up, right? I'm starting to hopefully earn stars soon. You know, answering questions as I go along. Right now, look what happened. I earned a star in the corner, right? So it's all these things that are going on with the learner that they're interacting with throughout, than just answering questions and answers through this game experience here. I'm going to pause it here. And again, I'll just show you the leaderboard. We think the leaderboards are important. Again, I kid you not. Have fun with it. It is the real fact. To me, this is the draw. This is where you get, this is the fun part, right? Because people will start talking smack in the hallways. And that's what you want, because now what they're doing, they're talking about training. And they're talking about it in a positive way, right? But you can do micro-learning around simulations, right? So here's an activity called Pathfinder. This could be me watching a video, by the way, not just answering questions, but now I go apply the information, right? Again, it's a lot of questions and answers, because what we want to do is ensure that when you're delivering your content based on what I understand, you understand. This is role play. I got feedback here. There'll be an image one coming up shortly. See if I can get one wrong. Right? No, incorrect. Here's my feedback, right? It's like virtual role play, right? And again, here's a question about an image, right? If I didn't take my course, what's wrong with this image besides making you nauseous and you're looking down over here to the side? You have height issues. You know, if you're not familiar with workplace safety, can you really tell what's wrong here? I can, right? And the guy's not hooked into his harness. Yeah. Now I can ask a question. What was wrong with that image? That could be me watching a video, right? So think about like your training. You mentioned when you were in a product example, right? Now imagine I just released a new widget. I want to teach someone to overcome objections, how to ask the right question. What question would you ask? Or playing a video of watching a good sales call or a bad sales call and then asking questions about it, but breaking the sales call video up into 5 little videos that played for 20 seconds, question, played for 20 seconds, question, to get to what? The mousetrap of the data, right? Okay. Everything we do, think about it, right? We're always driving towards an end of how do we collect more information, right? So again, I know we don't have a lot of time left, unfortunately. Yeah, no, we got to wrap it up. But this, I think, was extremely helpful just to see, one, you know, how the build works, because I think that's important to understand what goes into building it, you know, what you get out of it, and then what it looks like for the user. So, again, I really appreciate you being here. This has been awesome. And again, I think we could probably talk for much longer. We'll definitely have to have you back. And yeah,
Okay, so yeah, I even told you this before we started the recording, that if people say, hey, cool, interested, or I might just want to learn a little bit more, what's the best way? Can they message you directly? How do they reach out?
Yeah, so I'll say it slowly. I'm Jordan Fladell. The easiest way to do that is to either just email me at mLevel. That's my first name and my last name with a period between the two, at mLevel. Come to my LinkedIn profile. Obviously, Chris is going to promote this out this way, so you'll get a chance to do that. Send me a message via LinkedIn. It's very much about a conversation to learn more about it. Obviously, we have a great YouTube site where you can go watch some videos, or you can go to our website. But again, I love personal conversations, so please feel free to reach out. I love learning from professionals in the L&D community as much as sharing our technology. So sometimes these calls are mutually beneficial, I would say. So love to hear from you, and love to, again, thank you, Chris, for having us on. I appreciate it. Looking forward to our next chance to connect.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, and we'll talk again soon, I'm sure. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening.